Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. And the paper title Fetishizing the Veiled Self, Gendered Islamophobia and the Politics of Misrepresentation. Paper English ലായിരിക്കും, but I would summarize in the beginning. ഈ പേപ്പർ വെയിലിനെ ഒരു റിലീജിയസ് അസേർഷൻ ആയിട്ട് മാത്രമല്ല, മറിച്ച് മാറിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന ഒരു ചിഹ്ന വ്യവസ്ഥയിലാണ് പ്ലേസ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. It is more of a reading of the semiotics or the changing semiotics of the veil, what it meant for the colonizers, what it meant for the Muslim women, and what it meant for the secular feminist. So the paper would take more nuanced position, which would be based on cultural identity, regional identity, agency, class, piety with respect to veil. 3 ഭാഗങ്ങളായിട്ടാണ് തിരിച്ചിരിക്കുന്നത്. ആദ്യ ഭാഗം യൂറോപ്യൻ ആധുനികത നിർമ്മിച്ച മതേതര വ്യവഹാരങ്ങളെ പ്രശ്നവൽക്കരിക്കുന്നു. തുടർന്ന് കോളനീകരണത്തിന്റെ ഭാഗമായി നടന്ന അപരനിർമ്മിതി എങ്ങനെയാണ് വെയിലിന്റെ വിഷ്വൽ പെർഫോമേറ്റിവിറ്റിയെ എക്സോട്ടിക് ഓറിയന്റൽ ഫീമെയിൽ എന്നതിലേക്ക് ചുരുക്കുന്നത് എന്ന് ചർച്ച ചെയ്യുന്നു. തുടർന്ന് വെയിൽ അഥവാ ഹിജാബിനെ പോസ്റ്റ് സെക്കുലർ വ്യവഹാരങ്ങളോട് ചേർത്ത് വായിക്കുന്നു. There is a prescript. നേരത്തെ Dr. Insha Malik was speaking about it, that we need not take a binary position, that we did not separate between colonial modernity on one side and Islamic revivalism on the other side. So my paper would also take the same position. This paper is never set in binaries. It revolves around deducing meaning or meaninglessness beyond the polarities of veiling and unveiling. The author places herself in those nuanced and subtle alternate spaces marked by constant chaos and disturbance, those spaces of constant oppression and tyranny, public, private and personal. ഹിജാബ് ധരിച്ചവർ ഹിജാബ് ധരിക്കാത്തവർ എന്ന ദ്വന്ദ്വത്തിനകത്ത് ഈ പേപ്പർ നിൽക്കുന്നില്ല. ഫദ്വ എൽഗുണ്ടി പറയുന്നത് പോലെ, I believe in solidarity with every woman who veils and at the same time unveils. First section, problematizing the secular. Secular liberal domain is earmarked by a rigid compartmentalization which unconsciously or consciously segregates the private and public. The progressive secular imaginary is often threatened by the appearance of religion outside the private space of individualized belief. This liberal anguish, which I would regard as secular intolerance, is patronizing and is bound within a hierarchical matrix, constantly producing and disseminating a set of ideas, images and forms within the public domain wherein religion is the ultimate other. Doctrine of secularism regards itself to be a neutral or non-religious space, madamillatta idam, independent of religious conviction, as argued by Talal Asad. Production and dissemination of secular or liberal code of conduct involved a simultaneous construct of another, and this otherness was easily ascribed to Islam. യൂറോപ്യൻ മതേതരത്വം നിർമ്മിച്ച പൊതു ഇടം സ്വകാര്യ ഇടം എന്ന ദ്വന്ദ്വത്തെക്കുറിച്ചാണ് പറഞ്ഞത്. മതരഹിതമാകണം മതേതരത്വം, അഥവാ മതം സ്വകാര്യ ഇടങ്ങളിലേക്ക് മാത്രം ചുരുങ്ങേണ്ട ഒന്നാണ് എന്നിങ്ങനെയുള്ള ടെറി ഈഗിൾട്ടന്റെ നിരീക്ഷണങ്ങൾ ഇതിനോട് ചേർത്ത് വായിക്കാവുന്നതാണ്. The semiotics of secular discourse is governed by elite Savarna etiquette, and thus the secularist and feminist, whom I would call as Fab-India feminism, are obsessed with the plight of Muslim women around the world who are grappled under the tyranny of Islamic fundamentalism and macho masculine madrasas. Complicity, multiplicity and intersectional nature of female spaces was selectively ignored and thus failed to reflect the diversity of Muslim women's experience and aspirations around the world. Added to that was secular antagonism to Islam, which represented a breach of secular values, a usurpation of the West constructed secular spaces. As put forth by Professor Andrew Catherine Wing, and I quote, Muslims have attempted to create an Islamic identity with local, institutional, societal and cultural structures. The erection of mosque and the loud Islamic calls to prayer represents a clash of civilizations, unquote. The Islamic veil and its visual presence meant for secular feminists a breach to the West's historical commitment to secularism and an adherence to patriarchy for which Islam stood for. Professor Mary Matsuda in Critical Race Feminism speaks about the multiple consciousness a woman of color may feel, which is marked by race, gender, ethnicity, marital status, class, and most pertinently, political and religious ideology. The cult image of Western paternal patriarchy has been evident in French and English colonial literature, and colonial feminism was to legitimize Europe's civilizing mission. Colonialism, culture, and women's question have always been a matter of contention and have been problematized by post-colonial theoreticians, including Partha Chatterjee in Nationalism and Women's Question, Leela Gandhi in Emblematics of Gender and Sexuality, and of course, Spivak. The Muslim woman was thus far more oriental than man, represented the impassive, undemanding, and insensate self. The intense preoccupation with the veiled female body as a phantasm, it's a term coined by Barbara Harlow, scrutinized by Algerian writer Malak Al-Aula in his Colonial Haram. Colonial Haram എന്ന പുസ്തകത്തിൽ പറയുന്നത് അൾജീരിയയിലെ ഫ്രീഡം സ്ട്രഗിളിന്റെ കാലഘട്ടത്തിൽ there was the Europeans in Algeria and they used to take the pictures of the Algerian Muslim women in veil. ഹിജാബ് ധരിച്ച അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ബുർക്ക ധരിച്ച മുസ്ലിം സ്ത്രീകളുടെ padam edutittu they would send in the form of picture postcards back to Europe. So that image of the Algerian Muslim women in a veil who hides herself behind the veil was something that we would call as exotic sexuality of the Orient. The picture postcards unravel the sexual fantasy of the colonizer over Algerian women, exposing the gendered violence of the white European male. Fadwa describes the sexual geography this way: Haram as the locus of an exotic and abnormal sexuality, a microcosmic Middle East, apotheosizing two characteristics perceived as essentially oriental: sensuality and violence. The epistemic violence of colonial semiotics revolved around the veil polygamy harem trilogy, wherein they emerged as signifiers of female enslavement and pinnacle of Islamic misgunning. And the next part is politicizing the post-secular veil. Any voluntary act of wearing the veil thus emerged to be predetermined by what feminists regard as false consciousness, wherein the Muslim women consciously or unconsciously internalize the inherent patriarchy of their religion. This reductionistic political vision effaced the pluralistic socio-cultural and historical domains where veil operated within the dialectics of class, piety, agency, and identity. Fadwa അവരുടെ കൾച്ചറൽ ആന്ത്രപ്പോളജിക്കൽ സ്റ്റഡിയിൽ ഒരു എക്സാമ്പിൾ കൊണ്ടുവരുന്നുണ്ട്. ഷീ ടോക്സ് അബൌട്ട് ദ ഷിയ വില്ലേജസ് ഓഫ് ബഹ്റിൻ. ഇപ്പോൾ ബഹ്റിനിലെ വെയിൽ എങ്ങനെയാണെന്ന് വെച്ചിട്ടുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ദ വിമൻ വുഡ് ടൈ ദ കീ ഓഫ് ദ ഹൗസ് ടു ദ വെയിൽ. So the key of the house is a signifier of the agency of the women, and it has been tied to the veil, which is an assertion of religious identity. So this all calls for a post-secular understanding of the veil, building beyond the unipolar compartmentalization of what is or what is not progressive. By maintaining the centrality of individual autonomy, liberal or illiberal actions can be tolerated. This post-secular location of freedom is pinpointed by Sabah Mahmood upon discussing political theorist John Christman. This opens up an interstitial domain of freedom and performance where the individual has the right to choose or not to choose her or his actions, no matter how illiberal they are. Post freedom എന്ന സങ്കല്പത്തെ സബാ മഹ്മൂദ് ഇങ്ങനെയാണ് എക്സ്പ്ലെയിൻ ചെയ്യുന്നത്. ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് ഡ്യൂറിംഗ് ദ ടൈം ഓഫ് സെക്കൻഡ് വേവ് ഫെമിനിസം ഓഫ് 1970s ദ വൈറ്റ് ഫെമിനിസ്റ്റ് അവർ ആർഗ്യൂ ചെയ്തതെന്ന് വെച്ചിട്ടുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഫാമിലി എന്ന ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂഷണൽ സ്ട്രക്ചർ തകർത്ത് കളയണം. ബട്ട് അറ്റ് ദ സെയിം ടൈം വി ഹാവ് ദ നേറ്റീവ് ആഫ്രിക്കൻ ആൻഡ് അമേരിക്കൻ ഫെമിനിസ്റ്റ് ഹു ആർ ആർഗ്യൂയിങ് ദാറ്റ് family is something that is a part of our community. It is a part of our social gathering. So you can't tell that this has to be dismantled. So idana oru post freedomത്തിന്റെ ഒരു location. അതിന്റെ ഒരു subjectivity, it keeps on changing. The paper at this juncture would examine the pluralist political discourses pertaining to Islamic veil as a radical science system toppling the power structures within and without. So Albert Hourani's oru ലേഖനമുണ്ട്, The Vanishing Veil, a Challenge to the Old Social Order. It argued on how the veil would disappear in Middle East by the end of 20th century. He pinpoints towards a backwardness of the veil and emphasizes the stringent need for the Muslim community to adopt advanced norms and practices of modernity, as argued by Laila Ahmad. This could be juxtaposed with Qasim Amin's argument in Liberation of Women, where he emphasizes the comprehensive superiority of Europe. Unveiling and the subsequent veiling in Egypt could be paralleled with two strands of feminism which emerged in the 20th century. We have the westward-looking feminism proposed by Qasim Amin and Huda Sharawi, and on the other hand we have the one other strand with Zainab al-Ghazali and Malak Nafis. So in the context of an emergent Islamic consciousness of 1970s, hijab was revived in Egypt, and that too with a distinct vocabulary and semiotics in the Arab-speaking region, beginning with Egypt. It became, as Laila Ahmad argues, a symbol of new consciousness and new activism. The socio-political space of resurgence was nuanced, and the political setting forth an assertion of socio-political, religious and gender identity. The renewal of Islamic religiosity marked a crucial turn in university spaces, wherein the women activists of 1970s started wearing Azzi al-Islami. Azzi al-Islamiയുടെ ഡ്രസ് കോഡിനെ കുറിച്ച് ഫദ്വ അവരുടെ വെയിൽ മോഡസ്റ്റി പിയറ്റി ആൻഡ് റെസിസ്റ്റൻസ് എന്ന പുസ്തകത്തിൽ she talks about the cultural anthropological perspective, and Laila Ahmad talks about the perspective of piety. So this was actually a bottom-up movement where there was a synthesis of Islamic ideals and reassertion of political domains. But this movement of 1970s, where there was a renewal of Islamic consciousness of Egyptian women, was not found in the chronicles of Egyptian feminism. And the next part is politicizing the veil. The agency of the native women in the colonial encounter has been a matter of contention. She, according to Leela Gandhi, was neither a subject nor an object, but rather embodied a sign system wherein culture, tradition and sacredness of the colonized and colonial modernity of the colonizer was inscribed upon. The veil, which was more of a cultural and national symbol than religious in Algeria, became the tool through which colonial strategy was worked out. Fanon argues in Algeria Unveiled, I quote, "Every veil that fell, every body that became liberated from traditional entrance, Algeria was accepting the rape of the colonizer. Colonialism propagandized the veil as fetish, and the women who hide herself behind the veil gained currency among modernist and secular feminists." This veiling of Algeria, Bourdieu states, was traditionalism, wherein veil lost its purely traditional religious dimension. The complexity of meaning and semiotics to which it corresponds move beyond the dimension of religion and emerges as a signifier of social class and cultural and regional nuances. Assyria's ഒരു example ഉണ്ട്. Assyrian സ്ത്രീകൾക്കിടയിൽ hijab is something that has been worn by the women of the upper class. And if the woman of the lower class begins to veil, they would be punished. So it's a marker of the cultural identity. And there is a difference in the veiling pattern among Palestinian women before and after Intifada. That is, a veil or dress covering communicated their peasant origin and their status as camp women. The epistemic violence committed by women's studies group or liberal or secular feminist is revealed as they pin down veil to a monolithic identity of Islam synonymously with women's invisibility, anonymity and subordination by selectively forgetting its pivotal social, political and symbolic roles. And I would conclude this by quoting Sabah Mahmood. The very practice of solidarity could not be grounded in the languages of feminism, progressivism, liberalism or, for instance, Islamism, but could only ensue within the uncertain, at times opaque conditions of intimate and uncomfortable encounters with eventuality. Assalamu alaikum.